My foster daughter slammed the door in my face. "I never asked you to take me in. Stop acting like you saved me." The social worker standing there said nothing and checked her clipboard. I went home and started packing her things. When they came looking for her college application fees the next week, every account was closed. The sound of that door hitting the frame is burned into my memory. Not just the physical slam, but what came before it, the way Kira looked at me like I was nothing. Like the 3 years I'd spent raising her meant absolutely nothing. The social worker, a woman named Bethany Crawford who'd been with Child Protective Services for 11 years, just stood there on the apartment hallway with her pen hovering over her paperwork. She didn't defend me, didn't acknowledge what had just happened. She asked if I wanted to reschedule our monthly check-in. I told her no. I told her we were done. I walked to my car, drove home, and started pulling everything I'd bought for Kira out of her room. Every piece of clothing, every book, every piece of furniture I'd assembled. By midnight, it was all in boxes in my garage. By morning, I'd called my attorney. I need to go back to understand how I got here. 3 years earlier, I was a single man in my late 30s, working as an operations manager for a logistics company, living alone in a 3-bedroom house that felt too big and too quiet. I'd never married, never had kids, spent my 20s and 30s building a career and assuming family would come later. Later never came. My younger brother, David, suggested I look into fostering. He'd done it years before, said it changed his life. I dismissed the idea at first. I didn't know anything about parenting, let alone parenting someone else's traumatized kid. But the idea stuck. I started researching. I took the classes, I got certified. 6 months later, I got the call about Kira. She was 15, been in the system since she was 12 when her mother died of an overdose. No father on record, no extended family willing to take her. She'd been through 4 foster homes in 3 years, each placement failing for various reasons that the caseworker, a different woman back then named Michelle Ortega, described as behavioral challenges. Kira was angry, she said, didn't trust adults, struggled in school, needed someone patient and committed. I met Kira at the CPS office on a Wednesday afternoon in March. She was small for 15, dark hair pulled back, wearing clothes that didn't fit right. She barely looked at me during our first conversation. When I asked her about school, she shrugged. When I asked about her interests, she said she didn't have any. When I asked if she wanted to come stay with me, she said it didn't matter what she wanted. That answer broke something in me. She moved in that weekend. I'd set up the spare bedroom, painted it a neutral gray, bought new furniture from a discount store, let her pick out bedding from Target. She chose black sheets and didn't say thank you. The first month was brutal. She barely spoke, ate dinner in her room, refused to engage with anything I suggested. I tried to be understanding. I'd read the books, knew about attachment disorders and trauma responses. I gave her space. I maintained boundaries. I showed up consistently. Slowly, incrementally, things shifted. She started eating dinner at the table, started asking for help with homework, started laughing at shows we watched together. By month 3, she smiled at something I said. By month 6, she called me by my first name instead of avoiding calling me anything. By the end of the first year, I thought we were building something real. I enrolled her in therapy with Dr. Nathan Sterling, a child psychologist who specialized in foster care trauma. 52 years old, 23 years in practice, came highly recommended. He saw Kira every week, worked with her on processing her mother's death, building coping skills, learning to trust again. The progress was slow but visible. Her grades improved from failing to mostly B's and C's. She joined the school art club, discovered she liked painting. She made a friend, a girl named Jasmine who lived 2 streets over. I bought her art supplies, drove her to Jasmine's house, attended her school exhibitions. I wasn't trying to replace her mother. I was trying to give her a foundation she'd never had, a safe place to grow. The money started becoming an issue in year 2. Foster care payments covered basics, but nothing extra. Kira needed things, needed better clothes for school because kids were cruel about what she wore, needed money for field trips and club activities, needed a laptop for schoolwork, needed art supplies that weren't cheap. I paid for it all. I made decent money, around $85,000 a year, enough to cover my mortgage and expenses with room for extras. I opened a savings account in my name for Kira's future, started putting $100 a week into it. I told her about it on her 16th birthday, showed her the balance, $3,000 at that point. I told her it was for college or trade school or whatever she wanted to do after high school. She hugged me. First time she'd ever initiated physical contact. I thought we'd turned a corner. By year 3, Kira was 17, a senior in high school, talking about college applications. Her grades had climbed to mostly A's and B's. She'd been accepted into an advanced art program. Dr. Sterling said she'd made remarkable progress, that the stability I provided had allowed her to heal in ways she wouldn't have otherwise. Michelle Ortega, who'd transferred to a different department, sent me a card saying I was exactly the kind of foster parent the system needed. I felt proud. I felt like I'd done something meaningful. I started looking at colleges with Kira, researching scholarships, planning campus visits. The savings account had grown to $8,400. I told her we'd use it for application fees, deposits, whatever she needed. She seemed excited, seemed grateful. I believed it was real. The shift was subtle at first. Kira started spending more time with a new group of friends, kids I hadn't met, kids she didn't want me to meet. She became secretive about her phone, guarded about her plans. When I asked about college applications, she got defensive, said she was handling it. When I offered to help, she said she didn't need my help. Dr. Sterling said it was normal teenage separation, establishing independence. I backed off, gave her space. Trusted that the foundation we'd built was solid enough to withstand normal adolescent boundary testing. I was wrong about that too. The breaking point came during a routine home visit from CPS. Bethany Crawford had taken over Kira's case 6 months earlier when Michelle retired. Bethany was younger, less experienced, seemed to view foster parents with skepticism rather than appreciation. She came every month, asked the same questions, checked the same boxes. Kira was always polite during these visits, showed Bethany her room, her schoolwork, talked about her plans. But this visit was different. Bethany asked about college funding. I explained the savings account, the plan to cover application fees and initial expenses, mentioned that Kira qualified for significant financial aid given her circumstances. Bethany asked Kira if she felt pressured about college. Kira said no. Then Bethany asked if she felt I was holding financial support over her head as control. That's when Kira's expression changed. She looked at me, then at Bethany, and said sometimes it felt like I expected too much gratitude. Said she appreciated what I'd done, but she didn't ask to be taken in, didn't ask for any of it. Said sometimes it felt like I was keeping score, like I wanted credit for being a decent person. My stomach dropped. I tried to respond, tried to explain that I'd never expected gratitude, that I supported her because I cared about her, not because I wanted recognition. Kira cut me off, said I was proving her point, said I was making it about me again. Bethany wrote something on her clipboard. I asked to speak with Kira privately. She refused. Said she was done talking. I asked Bethany if we could schedule a follow-up to discuss this calmly. Bethany said she'd be in touch. Then Kira stood up, walked to the door, and that's when it happened. I followed her into the hallway, tried to explain that I wasn't upset, that we could talk about her feelings, that I wanted to understand. She spun around and screamed at me, told me to stop acting like I saved her, that she never asked me to take her in, that I chose this and didn't get to make her feel guilty about it. Then she slammed the door. The sound echoed down the hallway. Bethany stared at her clipboard. I stood there, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Bethany asked if I needed a minute. I said no. I said I was fine. I walked to my car and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could trust myself to drive. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying the moment, trying to understand where it came from. Had I been overbearing? Had I made her feel obligated? I'd tried so hard to avoid exactly that, to support without suffocating, to give without demanding. But maybe she was right. Maybe I had expected gratitude. Maybe I had been keeping score without realizing it. By the time I got home, the self-doubt had hardened into something else. Clarity. If Kira genuinely believed I'd done all this for recognition, if she saw my support as manipulation rather than care, then continuing was pointless. I couldn't make her see what I'd given if she was determined not to see it. I couldn't force her to value something she didn't want to value. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. I started with her room. Every piece of furniture I'd bought went into the garage. The desk, the chair, the bookshelf, the dresser. I left the bed frame because it came with the house. I boxed up the clothes I'd purchased, separated them from the few items she'd had when she arrived. I packed the art supplies, the laptop, the books. I made a detailed inventory, documented every item with photos and receipts where I still had them. By midnight, her room was nearly empty. The walls were bare. The closest held only the clothes she'd brought 3 years ago. It looked like it had before she arrived, sterile, waiting for someone who might appreciate it. The next morning, I called my attorney, a family law specialist named Gregory Vaughn, who'd helped me with the initial foster certification process. 58 years old, 32 years practicing law, had seen every variation of family conflict imaginable. I explained what happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to close the savings account, remove Kira from my health insurance, stop all financial support beyond what the state required. He asked if I was sure. I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. He said he'd draft the necessary paperwork. I asked how quickly it could be done. He said by end of week if I wanted to move fast. I told him I wanted to move immediately. Wednesday morning, I withdrew all $8,400 from Kira's college fund and deposited it into my personal account. I contacted my health insurance provider and removed her from my policy effective immediately. I canceled the college prep course I'd enrolled her in, got a partial refund of $600. I compiled every receipt, every bank statement, every documented expense I'd incurred for Kira beyond the state stipend. The total came to $23,700 over 3 years. I wasn't trying to recoup the money. I was documenting reality, showing myself, and anyone who asked, exactly what I'd invested in someone who thought I was keeping score. Thursday, Bethany Crawford called. She wanted to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss the incident. I told her that wouldn't be necessary because I was requesting Kira be moved to a different placement. Bethany went silent. Then she asked why. I explained that if Kira felt controlled or manipulated by my support, the healthy thing was to remove myself from the situation. Bethany said that seemed extreme. I asked if she'd prefer I continue housing someone who explicitly stated she didn't want to be there. She didn't have an answer. I told her to start looking for a new placement and hung up. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Michelle Ortega, now working in CPS administration. She'd heard about my call. She asked what happened. I told her everything. She sighed and said Kira was still processing trauma, that outbursts didn't reflect her true feelings. I said that might be true, but it didn't change what she said. Michelle asked me to reconsider. I said no. Friday afternoon, Kira came home from school to a nearly empty room. I was in the kitchen when I heard her scream my name. She came downstairs, furious, demanding to know what I'd done with her things. I told her calmly that everything I'd purchased was in the garage, that she was welcome to take anything that belonged to her before she moved to her next placement. She stared at me like I was insane, asked what I was talking about. I said I'd requested she be moved because she clearly didn't want to be here. She said she never said that. I reminded her of exactly what she'd said 3 days ago. She said she was angry, that she didn't mean it. I said intent didn't change impact. She started crying, said I was abandoning her like everyone else. I told her I wasn't abandoning her. I was respecting her stated feelings. She called me cruel. I didn't respond. She ran back upstairs and slammed her door again. Different sound this time. Emptier. The weekend was silent. Kira didn't come out of her room except to use the bathroom. I left food outside her door. She didn't touch it. Sunday evening, Bethany called to say she'd found a placement, a group home that specialized in older teens aging out of the system. Kira would move the following Saturday. I said that worked. Bethany asked if I wanted to talk to Kira before the move. I said Kira knew where to find me if she wanted to talk. Bethany said I was making a mistake. I thanked her for her opinion and ended the call. Monday morning, I packed Kira's original belongings, the things she'd arrived with 3 years ago. One duffel bag, a few outfits, a photo of her mother, a worn stuffed animal. That's what she'd be leaving with unless she asked for something else. She didn't ask. The placement happened early Saturday morning. Bethany arrived with another caseworker, a man named Leonard Foster who'd been with CPS for 19 years. They helped Kira carry her duffel bag to the car. Kira didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye. Bethany gave me paperwork to sign, officially ending the placement. I signed. Leonard asked if I planned to foster again. I said no. He nodded like he understood. They drove away. I went back inside, walked through the empty house, and felt nothing. The grief would come later. Right then, I just felt tired. The following week, Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. It was a woman named Patricia Nolan, a guidance counselor at Kira's high school. She'd been helping Kira with college applications. She said Kira had come to her in tears because the college fund I'd promised her was gone. Patricia asked if there was a misunderstanding. I explained there was no misunderstanding, that I'd closed the account because Kira was no longer in my care. Patricia said Kira needed that money for application fees, that she'd already committed to applying to 6 schools at $75 per application. I said that was unfortunate, but no longer my responsibility. Patricia said I was punishing a child for having normal teenage emotions. I said Kira was 17, nearly an adult, and actions had consequences. Patricia called me heartless. I hung up. Thursday morning, I got an email from Dr. Sterling's office, a bill for unpaid sessions. Apparently, Kira's insurance had lapsed, and they needed payment for 3 appointments totaling $480. I called the office, spoke with the billing coordinator, explained that Kira was no longer my dependent and directed them to contact CPS for payment. The coordinator said CPS wouldn't cover therapy that wasn't pre-approved. I said that wasn't my problem anymore. She said they'd have to send the bill to collections. I said do what you need to do, and hung up. An hour later, Dr. Sterling himself called. He asked what was going on. I gave him the abbreviated version. He said cutting off support so abruptly could seriously damage Kira's progress. I asked if he'd heard what she said to me. He said he had, that Kira had discussed it in their last session. I asked what she'd said. He said he couldn't share specifics, but that Kira was confused and hurt by my reaction. I told him Kira knew exactly how to reach me if she wanted to have an actual conversation. He said I was putting my pride above her well-being. I said I was establishing boundaries after being told my help was unwanted. He sighed and said he hoped I'd reconsider. I didn't respond. He wished me well and hung up. Friday, Bethany showed up at my house unannounced, said she needed to talk. I let her in. She sat in my living room and told me Kira was struggling at the group home, that she'd been asking about me, that she wanted to apologize. I asked if she'd actually apologized or just said she wanted to. Bethany admitted Kira wanted me to reach out first. I said that wasn't going to happen. Bethany said I was being stubborn. I said I was being consistent. Bethany said Kira was a child who'd experienced trauma and abandonment her entire life, that my withdrawal was confirming her worst beliefs about herself. I said maybe it was, or maybe it was teaching her that words matter and relationships require mutual respect. Bethany said I didn't understand foster care. I said I understood it fine, I just refused to be a doormat. Bethany stood up, said she'd tried, and left. I sat in the quiet house and didn't feel guilty. The next week, I got a call from Gregory Vaughn. He said CPS had filed a complaint against me for improper termination of a foster placement. I asked on what grounds. He said they were claiming I'd abandoned Kira without proper notice and that I'd coerced her removal by creating an uninhabitable environment. I laughed. Actually laughed. I told Gregory I'd documented everything. Had witnesses to Kira's statements, had followed proper channels for requesting a new placement. He said he knew that the complaint was garbage, but we'd have to respond formally. I said fine. He drafted a response detailing the timeline, Kira's statements to Bethany, my proper notification to CPS, and my right to request removal of a foster child from my home. He attached my documentation of expenses, not to claim reimbursement, but to demonstrate the extent of my investment in Kira's welfare. He sent it to CPS with a polite suggestion that they withdraw the complaint. They did. No apology. Just a terse email saying the matter was closed. 2 weeks after Kira moved out, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Kira's handwriting. I debated throwing it away unopened. Instead, I sat down and read it. She said she was sorry. Said she'd been angry and scared and took it out on me. Said she knew I'd done everything for her, that she'd been ungrateful and cruel. Said she understood why I'd asked her to leave but hoped I'd give her another chance. Said she missed me. Said she needed the college money because the group home couldn't help with applications, and she had deadlines approaching. Asked if we could talk. I read it 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I'd learned something important about myself. I couldn't help someone who didn't want help until it became convenient. Kira didn't miss me. She missed what I provided. There's a difference. 3 months passed. I heard nothing directly from Kira, but got updates through the system. She'd applied to 2 community colleges using fee waivers, got accepted to both, planned to start in the fall. She'd aged out of the group home and moved into transitional housing for young adults. She was working part-time at a grocery store. She was seeing a different therapist through a community clinic. She was, by all accounts, surviving. I was glad for that. I didn't want her to fail. I just couldn't be the one to carry her anymore. 4 months in, I ran into Patricia Nolan at a coffee shop. She saw me, hesitated, then came over. Asked if we could talk. I said sure. She said she'd been hard on me during our phone call, that she'd heard more of the story since then and understood my position better. She said Kira had been struggling, but was starting to stabilize. She said Kira talked about me sometimes, seemed to understand now what she'd lost. I asked if Kira had sent Patricia to talk to me. Patricia said no, that this was her own decision. She said she'd spent 30 years working with kids in foster care, and that what I'd done for Kira was exceptional, that most foster parents wouldn't have invested a fraction of what I did. She said Kira was lucky to have had me, even if she couldn't see it at the time. I thanked her and said I hoped Kira would be okay. Patricia said she thought she would be. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, then went our separate ways. 6 months after Kira left, I got a Facebook message from Kira. She'd created a new account, found me, sent a long message. She was in community college, working 2 jobs, living with a roommate. She was doing okay. She'd been in therapy, working on understanding why she pushed people away. She said she'd thought a lot about what happened between us, that she understood now that I wasn't trying to control her, that my support wasn't manipulation. She said she'd grown up believing that people who helped her wanted something in return, that love was always conditional, that she'd sabotaged our relationship because she was waiting for me to prove her right. She said she was sorry, said she wished she could take it back, said she understood if I never wanted to speak to her again, but wanted me to know that what I did mattered, that I'd changed her life even if she'd been too broken to appreciate it at the time. She said she didn't expect anything from me, wasn't asking for money or help, just wanted me to know. I read it, sat with it, then closed the message without responding. Not because I was angry anymore, but because I'd moved on. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. A year after Kira left, I ran into Bethany Crawford at a community event. She saw me, looked uncomfortable, but came over anyway. She said she owed me an apology, said she'd been wrong about how she handled Kira's case, that she'd let her biases about foster parents cloud her judgment. She said she'd seen what happened to Kira after leaving my home, how much she'd struggled, how much she'd lost. She said in hindsight she should have pushed harder for family therapy instead of facilitating the placement change. I told her I appreciated the apology, but that I didn't think therapy would have fixed it. Kira needed to hit bottom to understand what she'd had. Bethany asked if I'd consider fostering again. I said no. She said she understood. We talked about other things for a while, then parted ways. I never saw her again. 18 months out, I was dating someone. Her name was Claire Dennison, a veterinarian I'd met through a friend. She knew about Kira, had listened to the whole story without judgment. She said it sounded like I'd done the right thing in an impossible situation, that boundaries weren't punishment, that you couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. She'd fostered animals, seen the same patterns, the same push-pull, the same sabotage. She got it. We took things slow, built something healthy, something mutual. It felt different from the one-sided exhaustion of trying to prove to Kira that I cared. With Claire, caring was easy because it was reciprocal. 2 years after Kira left, I got a letter. Not from Kira. From her roommate, a woman named Alyssa Freeman. She said Kira had asked her to write because she didn't know if I'd read something from her directly. She said Kira had graduated from community college, was transferring to a state university on a scholarship, was studying social work. Said Kira wanted to work with foster kids, wanted to be for someone else what I'd been for her. Said Kira thought about me often, hoped I was well, understood why I didn't respond to her messages. Said Kira wanted me to know that she'd made it because of the foundation I'd given her, that everything I'd taught her about stability and boundaries and self-respect had eventually sunk in. Said Kira would understand if I threw this letter away, but hoped I'd at least know she was okay. I kept the letter. Didn't respond to it, but I kept it. What I learned from Kira is that you can't make someone appreciate you. You can give everything, sacrifice constantly, show up relentlessly, and it still might not be enough. Not because you failed, but because the other person isn't ready to receive what you're offering. Kira needed to believe she was unlovable, more than she needed to accept that I loved her. That's trauma. That's what years of abandonment and loss do to a person. I understand it now in a way I didn't then. But understanding doesn't mean I should have stayed. Understanding doesn't mean I was wrong to walk away. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of pushing you away. Sometimes they need to lose you to understand what they had. I don't regret fostering Kira. I don't regret the money, the time, the emotional investment. I don't even regret leaving. What I regret is not seeing sooner that I couldn't fix her, that healing was work she had to do herself, that my job was to provide stability and then get out of the way. I tried to be her savior when what she needed was a foundation. I gave her that. She built on it eventually, just not with me in the picture. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's how it was always going to end. Some people come into your life to teach you where your limits are. Kira taught me mine. I'll always be grateful for that, even if I wish it hadn't hurt so much to learn. The college fund money is still in my account, all $8,400, untouched. Sometimes I think about sending it to her anonymously. Sometimes I think about donating it to a foster care charity in her name. Mostly, I just leave it there. A reminder that I did something good even if it didn't work out the way I'd hoped. Claire says I should let it go, that holding on to it is holding on to the past. She's probably right, but I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday. For now, it sits there. Proof that I tried. Proof that I cared. Proof that sometimes your best isn't enough, and that's nobody's fault. It just is. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.